My name is Mark Hopkins, and I'd like to invite you to touch your belly button. For real. Touch your belly button and think about what it signifies. My mom is in the house tonight, and this is where we used to be attached. She has a belly button too, and so does her mother, and so did her mother, and so on for 200,000 years or so. And if we keep tracing that line back further, eventually we find ancestors that didn't have belly buttons, ancestors that laid eggs, unicellular ancestors that reproduced by cell division, all the way back to the earliest life on Earth, 3 or 4 billion years ago. You can stop touching your belly button now if you want. When I think about the challenges and opportunities for the next generation and what kind of leadership will be most needed, this is the context. Billions of years of striving and triumph and failure, unimaginable catastrophes, and incredible stories of survival. And we're not at the end point of that journey. Contemporary humans are just one particularly robust and thorny branch of a many-branch tree at a midpoint between the thousands of generations before us and hopefully the thousands yet to come. In a 1923 essay called The Problem of Generations by sociologist Karl Mannheim, he describes a constant churn of human beings, with new individuals joining a culture as other individuals disappear, each experiencing a tiny slice of history and participating in a continuous transmission of accumulated cultural heritage from generation to generation. So basically, we each have a brief lifespan to figure out what the hell is going on, and maybe to contribute something to the cultural pool. That's the task for every new generation, as Mannheim puts it, to forget that which is no longer useful and to covet that which has yet to be won. That's also the trickiest part. How do we determine individually and collectively what is no longer useful and want to strive towards? Hans Scholl was born in Germany in 1918. His sister Sophie was born in 1921. Their older sister, Inga, in her book, described the culture that surrounded them as they grew up. Hitler, so we heard on all sides, Hitler would help this fatherland to achieve greatness, fortune, and prosperity. We found this good, and we were willing to do all we could to contribute to the common effort. It is not surprising that all of us, Hans and Sophie and the others, joined the Hitler Youth. But though the siblings were enthusiastic participants at first, they soon became disillusioned. They witnessed abuse of their Jewish friends, experienced the banning of cherished books, saw their father arrested for criticizing Hitler, and increasingly understood the Nazi doctrine that surrounded them to be incongruent with reality. From 1942 to 1943, Hans and Sophie, along with Alexander Schmorell, Willy Graf, Christoph Probst, and Kurt Huber, formed the core of the White Rose. It was a resistance group that distributed more than 15,000 leaflets criticizing the Nazi regime across Munich and southern Germany until their arrests and executions. Sophie Scholl's last words are reported to have been the following: "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine, sunny day, and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us, thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" Hans and Sophie, just like the rest of us, were born into a cultural context that was largely invisible to them, one that seemed natural and normal and that shaped the way they saw the world. What was remarkable about them and the rest of the White Rose is that they were able to unlearn some of the most harmful parts of their cultural programming and look beyond their immediate context to a bigger part of the human story. That story goes back 200,000 years. For the vast majority of our species' history, we roamed as small groups of hunter-gatherers. Being part of a group was a huge advantage for our survival and reproduction, and outsiders could be threats to our group's food supply and resources. Our written histories, the development of our civilizations, that all happened in the past 10,000 years, which seems like a long time from the perspective of our individual lives, but from an evolutionary standpoint, it's a blink of an eye. Our cultures and societies have changed drastically since those days of hunting and gathering, but we haven't. None of us are immune to those in-group and out-group dynamics, or to the short-sightedness that comes with our fleeting lifespans. And we never will be immune to those dynamics. And because cultures are created and recreated in that constant churning flow of individual humans, our cultures aren't immune to those forces of ignorance either. That's why we see the same mistakes being made over and over again through the human story. That belly button thing from earlier, I borrowed that from my mentor, Ken Lowe, the founder of Human Venture Leadership, who has been studying human learning for the past 50-odd years. As he regularly reminds me, leadership isn't hard or complicated. It's the capacity to activate something in people that guides them in a particular direction. The problem is, the things that are easiest to activate are rarely the most helpful. We don't just need leadership, we need wise leadership. Because here's the thing, we can't afford to keep making the same mistakes. Since 1945, we've had tools capable of extinguishing all human life. Since the Industrial Revolution, we've been barreling towards a climate that our species hasn't seen since before the dawn of agriculture, one that we are ill-suited to survive. The good news is we can learn. We learn more about ourselves every day, our species, our habitat, our universe, their histories and possible futures. We can identify the mistakes we've made before, the mistakes we always make, and we can do better. We can learn from pioneers like the White Rose, who recognized the harm and suffering that surrounded them and committed their lives to ending it. So, as you get swept up in everyday life with its struggles and decisions and delights, I invite you to stop, touch your belly button. Remember what it means. Think about all the generations that came before us, what they learned, what we can learn from them. Remember that each generation is just one sprint in a multi-generational relay race across time and space, entrusted with a baton for a fraction of a moment. Think about what needs to be done to foster and support the next generation, the one after that, and all the generations to come, not just for our own communities and our own cultures, but all of humanity and all of life. And let that shape what you do next. Thank you.